What's up, MetaNerdz? This video is all about the Weequay species, the species of Hando Ohnaka, and some of Jabba the Hutt's guards. The Weequay had an average height of 1.7 meters, or about 5.5 feet, making them just a little bit shorter than your average height human. They had a very dry, cracked, leathery skin, and they had no lips, and a frill that ran underneath their chin. Despite evolving from a very sparse environment, they have a pretty long average lifespan of 90 years. What makes them very different from a lot of other humanoid species is that their main form of communication was through pheromones. They were able to produce so many different types of pheromones that they actually could develop a complex language out of it. These smells were not perceptible to other species, and it's said that only Jedi could tell if two Weequay were communicating using this method. Because they developed in millennia of isolation on their homeworld, they never picked up the practice of naming people. Weequays could tell each other apart just by smelling their different pheromones. And as the Weequay population grew and started to spread out across their planet, eventually these pheromones became so unique that Weequay would be able to tell what part of the world they were from just by subtle differences in their pheromones. Think of it almost like an accent. Eventually, as they came in contact with other species, they developed the need to speak to them. But even after millennia of contact, Weequay would seldom speak in a complete sentence, making many other species think that they were unintelligent. And whenever you know a Weequay that has a proper name, then you know that he's been living away from his planet and his people for a long time. One of the other noticeable Weequay features is their long braided hair. These are actually deeply symbolic, and each braid was known as a seclusion braid, and a Weequay would grow one for each year that they spent away from their homeworld. This practice was not observed by female Weequay because they are all bald. A group of famous Weequay that left their homeworld was the pirate gang led by Hando Ohnaka. Being away from their home for so long, they didn't keep up a lot of their religious and tribal practices of their people. There were also many Weequay that became Jedi, and there were actually 5 that were killed during the Clone Wars. Jedi Knight Kamar's Redath Gom was killed during the opening battle of Geonosis. Jedi Master Cossack died during the first battle of Kamino. Jedi Master Tai was killed during the Battle of Thustra, and Jedi Master Sora Bulq actually betrayed the Jedi Order and became one of Count Dooku's Dark Acolytes. And last but not least, there was also a Jedi General named Sev who was killed during Order 66. They come from the planet Thriller, a world that was located in the Outer Rim, but it was much less remote than other Outer Rim planets, as it was located near a crucial hyperlane which connected Hutt space to the rest of the galaxy. Because of this key location, it became a trader's hub, but also a wretched hive of villainy. Most of this planet is desert, with only minimal vegetation, tons of rocks and mountains, and frequent sandstorms. The oceans had high acidity, though there was some marine life here. The geological composition of the Weequay homeworld contained tons of copper, gems, and transparasteel, a material that was a lot like glass but as strong as steel, that was used in starships and buildings. Weequay politics are very tribal, and there was never one controlling government for the entire planet. The only thing close to a government was the Hutt hegemony, which controlled the Weequays for much of their history. Though it should be pointed out that they never treated the Weequay as slaves, or attempted to meddle in their affairs, outside of making sure that all of their trade relations were well taken care of, and that they could support the other planets in Hutt space. Later, another criminal syndicate known as the Black Sun would also have a heavy presence on their planet. The only time that you could say that the Weequay homeworld was under one government was when the Galactic Empire seized control of it. Their religions and superstitions was similar to many tribes on Earth, as they had gods for many elements of nature, and believed that the world was inhabited by different spirits and nymphs. They had a moon god named Quay, and a thunder god named Amshak. As you might have guessed, Quay was their main god, and the word Weequay translates to follower of Quay. Like all religions though, there were varying levels of worship within the Weequay, and because of their focus on their tribe's honor, oftentimes many overzealous Weequay would murder a fellow Weequay just to get their tribe's honor back, or to try and honor their gods. Their religion even affected the way their cities were laid out, as each city was built around a shrine of black polished stone, which was known as a thal. Weequay would sacrifice food and other valuables to the thal, and their religion forbid any Weequay from building a thal off of their home planet. So any religious Weequay that were out and about in the galaxy were instead instructed to carry out animal sacrifices in order to pay respects to their moon god Quay. One ancient Weequay myth surrounds animals known as bandigos, which were like giant wolves with the dried up skin of a Weequay. These creatures would bury under the sand, and at night would make terrifying howls, which Weequay thought were the sounds of water nymphs that were trying to lure unsuspecting Weequay into a place called Temptation Canyon. Another local creature was called the Rakor Da'an, and these were like a mix of a dog and a scorpion. Their poisonous claws and stinger tail were the natural enemies of the bandigos, and thus were tamed by Weequays and used to aid them in hunting. For much of the early history of the Weequay species, their ancestors roamed the world as hunter-gatherers. It wasn't until the year 25,100 BBY that they were able to advance their technology to an industrial level. Learning how to work together, Weequay civilization grew, and many cities popped up along the coasts. Luckily for the advancement of their species, not many other species knew that their planet even existed, and they only ever got the occasional trader. Early Weequay civilization could have been wiped out completely, but luckily for them, the Zim Empire, an expansionist human conqueror, never made it to the planet Thriller. And to make sure that this didn't happen, Weequay mercenaries first got involved with the Hutts by sending thousands of recruits to the Hutt Empire to try and keep the humans from expanding into the Outer Rim. They were successful in keeping the humans off their planet, but their new allies, the Hutts, quickly realized that they could make some money off the Weequay species. Ever since this event, they were economically dependent upon Hutt cartels, but like I said, it wasn't that bad of a deal for the Weequay. They weren't discovered by the Galactic Republic until sometime between 15,000 and 8,000 BBY, and they weren't involved in any major conflicts until a group of Sith Lords known as the Dreadmasters, operatives working for the Sith Empire, temporarily were able to use their mastery of the dark side of the Force to cause a mass exodus from Thriller. But as the galactic war between the Republic and the Sith Empire continued, the Dreadmasters moved on, and the Weequay homeworld went back to normal. The Weequay experienced millennia of peace, until an event known as the Hutt colonization. 282 years before the Battle of Yavin, thousands of members of a species called the Hutt established settlements on the Weequay homeworld. Tensions quickly rose between the Weequay and these new foreigners, and fights would break out for centuries until 10 BBY, when the tension finally erupted into all-out civil war. The Hutt fought to protect their cities, and many Weequay militias were formed. Many were killed on both sides, with the Hutt eventually initiating a peace agreement. Of course, this didn't put an end to all the hostilities, and there was still species-based violence amongst the two groups. And just before the breakout of the Clone Wars, a Nikto cult went to the Weequay homeworld and went on a homicidal rampage, which killed 27 Weequay. Once the Galactic Republic became the Empire, Palpatine wanted to put an end to all the crime and violence that was occurring on and pouring out of the planet of Thriller. He sent 2 Imperial-class Star Destroyers to be positioned in orbit around the planet and made sure that all of the major cities on the Weequay homeworld had an obvious military presence. But the Empire underestimated just how corrupt this planet was. With millennia of rule by Hutts and a heavy presence of Black Sun operatives, the locals were used to getting around the law, and many of the Imperial officials were simply bribed to look away. Higher-ups in the Empire, however, got a hold of intel that showed that a lot of recruits to the Alliance were coming from the planet Thriller, and suspecting corruption within their own ranks, the Empire bombed most of the Weequay militia outposts. Later in the year 25 ABY, the Weequay homeworld would be taken over by the Yuuzhan Vong. With their relatively primitive technology, the Weequay didn't stand a chance, and their entire planet was taken over in just a few days. And though its inhabitants were enslaved, and its world terraformed, after the Yuuzhan Vong were driven out of the galaxy, the Weequay adapted and went back to their normal life on Thriller. And the very last thing we ever hear from the Weequay is that during Darth Krayt's Galactic Empire in the year 137 ABY, Thriller was again taken over by a foreign power and subjugated under the rule of the new Dark Lord. Well, that's it for the Weequay. But before you go, you want to hear these cool facts and some behind the scenes stuff. There was actually a Weequay officer named Joram Bey who fought as rogue leader of the famous Rogue Squadron. And George Lucas said that he named the Weequay after Queequeg, a character from the novel Moby Dick, who was a South Pacific islander and a tattooed cannibal described to have a lot of the ruggedness that strikes you when you see a Weequay. And this is kind of my own observation, but it seems like the Weequay were based on pre-Islamic Saudi Arabia. Their desert location, tribal community, pagan worship of many gods, and the spelling of a lot of their words and cities, like Al-Kampar, as well as a religious building which contained an important black rock, seemed to be a reference to what Mecca was before the time of Islam. Let me know if you guys think this might have been the inspiration for the culture of the Weequay in the comments below. But that's it for the Weequay species. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button, and be sure to leave a comment down below if I missed any cool facts, or if you have a suggestion for future videos. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MetaNerdz Lore, so you can see us build Star Wars props and cosplays, along with some other cool Star Wars stuff. If you want to help support this channel, check out the description below for our Amazon store and our Patreon. And be sure to subscribe, because we're making videos like this every single day. But more important than all that, remember, never go hunting without your scorpion dog, and the Force will be with you, always.